Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney by Kevin Wells. An excerpt from Chapter 1, The Dialogue of the Saints. My dear brothers and sisters, I write from paradise. I am the Curé of Ars, Jean-Marie Baptiste Vianney, a chosen priest in the line of Melchizedek. And because God is a furnace of love for you, He's asked me to compose a letter and drop it as a postcard from heaven, as if it was my heart. More than that, He has entrusted me with the task of guiding you through these challenging days, when the light of both divine truth and human reason seems to be fading. God desires that you flourish in this moment, even amid the minefield of crisis in the family, the church, and your deeply divided world. Through the example of my life and ours, I will show you how. Now let me tell you how this letter came about. A cosmic event broke my heart and God's in 2018 and 2019, when tens of thousands of you, God's faithful, knelt to venerate my incorrupt heart at chapels, shrines, parishes, and basilicas across the United States. Never in the history of your country has so sweeping a dirge risen to paradise as it did then. As the Knights of Columbus reverently carried my heart from state to state, it broke again and again. You came in waves of anguish. Many of you poured out your grief over a single sorrow. You told God through me that you had lost your children and loved ones to the world. With blurred eyes and clenched hands, you implored in fierce whispers, St. John Vianney, go to God. Beg for my children. The world has stolen them. But also find my brothers and sisters, parents, friends, and the hopeless and confused. In a dimension you cannot see, your pleas, a torrent of sorrow, fear, and loneliness, covered the circumference of heaven. You begged for your little lambs, your children who'd been lured into the Western world's choking smoke of minimalism, indifference, wokeism, dark ideologies, and the spiritualities of madness. You pleaded and prayed for those close to you, those with whom you share a bond of family, community, work, and yes, even baptism. God turned to me in paradise then. He stood next to Philomena. The image, God and my patron saint standing side by side, brought tears to my eyes and a lump in my throat. God softly spoke a few words to Philomena, who turned her gaze to me. God had sent the little martyr to guide me once again. It was my muse who spoke the words that prompted this correspondence. Dear Jean-Marie, they mourn for their lost ones, she said, staring intently into my glistening eyes. Beneath this cry, though, is another longing, one for you. Philomena, I shifted my gaze. My Lord and my God, I implored, explain to this dim soul. God looked at me with tenderness, then nodded to Philomena, who continued, O Curé, they plead for shepherds who will stand firm and fight against Satan's attempts to claim and corrupt souls, she said. Deep down, these parents understand that the bridegroom has always sought out lost lambs. But they cannot find priests with magnanimous hearts like yours, those with a paternal and pastoral impulse to save souls at any cost. I stood speechless, my tongue tied. In the silence, as I took to heart God's commission, my little guide began summoning priests from the heavenly court. Momentarily, Damien the leper, Pope Peter, Maximilian Kolbe, John Bosco, Philip Neri, Pio, John Newman, Francis de Sales, and Patrick stood before us and God. They too had been shaken by the plaintive cries before the reliquary of my heart. The child martyr leveled her gaze over each of the saints and spoke firmly. The Father has gathered us to discuss a letter he is asking the Holy Curé to write to grieving parents, to those whose children turn away from the sacraments, to those friends and family have wandered away from grace. As pre-saints, God has urged that you speak plainly and with precision, so that together we may strengthen Jean-Marie for the mission entrusted to him by the Father. The Curé must know the stakes of the spiritual war he's been asked to address. His task is to bring the sweet fire of his priesthood and ours into the open hearts of faithful parents, indeed, to all of those who love heaven more than they love earth. God remained silent, allowing Philomena's words to settle deep in the souls of the priest saints. After a period of silence, the little lioness explained, "Before we exchange thoughts on the Curé's task, we must discuss what led these faithful disciples to kneel in looming despair before the Curé's heart, and what has led myriads of both young and wearied Catholic souls to leave the faith." The priest saints squared their shoulders, nodding like infantrymen readying for war. In heaven, each come to regard Philomena as a gladiator. Each of us stood in silence, deferring to the martyr pope. Yet Peter too remained mute. He knew that Philomena's presence and words would set the stage for what had remained, until now, an unspoken topic in paradise: the piecemeal re-engineering and softening of the ministerial priesthood. God nodded at the wonder worker. Then Philomena spoke once again. Never in Christendom's history do faithful parents and sincere followers of Christ lament as they do today. Their mournful symphony rises to heaven like the incense of the dead. The Church in the West has failed in her mandate to kill the wolf of modernism Pope Pius X warned of more than a century ago. Satan has used the gap in the wall to chase legions of children into thick woods of confusion, where their power to reason is met by a gauntlet of modern educators who lead them astray. Relativists, entertainers, Marxists, Luciferians, pagans, and the like. Even the young ones who've managed to escape are awash in a septic current which has flooded their often unformed souls. But it is not only children and adolescents who suffer beneath the weight of the culture. Many adults too have lost the power of reason. Countless millions of them do not pray. We do not speak of it in heaven, but the sexual revolution and sexual identity crisis are killing souls. Although the demons steal souls through modern technological devices, many parents give them to their children as unlimited use toys, which befoul their tender souls in the fashion of Ouija boards. The martyr paused and chill filled the space. God's eyes had become fiery orbs. The priest saints and I looked down at heaven's floor, afraid of his countenance. But Philomena stood erect and sympathetically studied the Father's face. We dared to lift our heads when a rumbling began to shake the heavens, and we beheld paradise bathed in a red light that stretched as far as we could see. The wisdom in Peter's quiet deference was silently admired by the priest saints and me. Philomena's plain-spokeness established the tone of our dialogue and shaped the words of my letter. God turned to me and looked at me with tender expectation before looking to Philomena once more. "Priest," she exclaimed, "when these parents cry out for their children, when these lonely and discouraged faithful cry out for their families, friends, and neighbors, they cry for Jean-Marie. They want a man willing to give away his life, like a log meant for the fire. Yet too many priests have chosen their own comfort over the fight." The brave-hearted child paused, her eyes flashing. As priests, each of you embraced your vocation in the trenches of spiritual warfare. You understood comfort was a form of corruption, and you fought it off ruthlessly, as if it was Satan himself. The priest titans nodded uniformly as heaven's blaze began to soften, shifting to the violet hue that lights the underside of clouds at the close of day. Through his Old Testament beard, St. Colby spoke with a voice that sounded like a tremor, and quoting scripture, "When I was a child, I used to talk as a child, think as a child, reason as a child. When I became a man, I put aside childish things." Paul's words have been ignored by many of today's modern bishops and priests. Instead of embracing their victimhood, too many cling to frequent social outings, social media streams, choice wines, evenings at expensive restaurants, and various forms of non-religious entertainment. Many too frequently bow their heads to technology and take extended vacations without their clerical clothes and Roman collar, where they reside in luxurious accommodations. On weekdays, too many choose to sleep in rather than nourishing their early rising workaday flock with an early mass. I watched the priest saints lower their head. No one dared to speak, fearing the martyr had spoken too plainly. Each feared looking into the face of God, and still, God remained silent. The leper broke the silence. Severity lay heavy in his eyes. Father Colby is not a prophet of doom, His words are precise. It has gone unmentioned in paradise, but few bishops and priests enter into the crucifixion of self their priesthood demands. Because of the cost, many will not embrace the kenosis they promised to God at ordination. They once knew their calling was to strip themselves of worldly comforts, but so few do. St. Francis de Sales spoke in a measured but direct manner. It is true. Many rarely offer their flock the opportunity to have their sins absolved. On this point, Jean-Marie is seen by many to have been a maniac whose confessional became his splintered home for 4 decades. His marathon days of cleansing souls in his confessional wasn't priestly mania, but rather a demonstration of love. The holy missionary from Bohemia, John Newman, spoke hesitantly. Yes, because the Curé was a mortified man, stripped of comforts, his inner eye was home to see penitents' hidden or unknown sins, whereby he could work to purge and uproot them. Many priests will not purify themselves by entering this mortified life, or even offer a fast once a week. Accordingly, their comfort blurs their inner eye and blunts their desire to comfort, or even notice, the devil's malice. And it must be said, the holy Bishop de Sales added, the root of the crisis is that many modern clergy are not devoted to prayer. Without this intimate union with Christ, they cannot even see the starved man of the cross, nor fully receive the blood he pours out for them. As the Curé saw in Robespierre's Judas priests, too many of today's priests have genuflected to the world. No one spoke, and God remained silent. With quiet dignity, the fisherman looked at God, who nodded. The first pope then gazed intently into the faces of his brothers. His eyes blazed. There are 4 predominating faults that weaken the modern priesthood, Simon Peter began. First, while many holy priests wake each day with a zeal to save souls, too few present themselves before our Savior in the monstrance to daily adore his precious face. The weight of their guilt, the silence, and the overwhelming presence of Jesus bombard their conscience, so they stay away. Second, many do not meet our Holy Mother in the Rosary, nor do they place themselves beneath her mantle, leaving their priesthoods maternally unprotected. She is their queen, but they do not seem to care. Third, because so many priests fail to properly prepare their souls for the holy sacrifice of the Mass, they do not pray it with devotion, or recognize their role as God's intercessors at the altar, their calling to stand between heaven and earth. For many, the Mass has become a duty rather than a sacred pearl. And finally, because many priests fear the response of the flock and the world, they do not preach on the hard topics of modernity. Their suffocation of the prophetic voice has spiritually contracepted their entire priesthood. After Simon Peter's diagnosis, no one knew what to say. The leper restarted the conversation. The Pope has uniquely identified the diseased root of the crisis, he said. These priests, he cried out, his voice rising, they've forgotten who they are. His voice softened some as he continued. The parents and penitents who knelt before Vianney's heart are good. Most of them try, day by day, to do their best for their children. They are diligent and mostly solicitous. But let's speak plainly about the millions of other Catholics who share the mindset of the world. They see acts of veneration, to please before relics, as nothing more than pious superstition. Many parents have lost their children to the world only after they were lost to the world themselves, and they scarcely consider it. That their children have strayed from the sacraments doesn't even trouble them. And yet they presume that they will be reunited with their children in heaven. Others straddle the world's fence. Afraid to offend, they fail to inspire, to warn, to help others find the path of salvation. They, too, presume that all will be saved. A sudden gust of wind swept through paradise, and a low rumble echoed. No one spoke, but I sensed that the leper's words, assured salvation, caused the priest saints to reflect on the countless millions of souls who once shared the same thought, only to find themselves in hell. Peter spoke above the winds, his voice heavy with sorrow. The grieving parents who collapsed at the Curé's heart felt abandoned, as I, too, abandoned our dear Lord at the cross. All those who truly believe feel alone. Peter looked at God, his words laden with sorrow, but the Father remained silent. Padre Pio spoke, his voice barely a whisper, yet a cut through the driving wind. The martyr Pope is right about the abandonment, Stigmatic said. But we must go deeper. The lost began to stray when they were very young, when they were still witnesses to the holy sacrifice. The child, even then, grasped something profound. He saw the inner priest at the altar and knew him. He could sense the light in the priest's eyes, the reverence in his rubrics, the brawn of his prophetic voice, the radiance that shone from within. And when the priest raised Christ's flesh and blood, the child instinctively understood the priest's essence by how he held the slaughtered lamb in his fingertips. It was then that the child unconsciously understood whether or not the priest cared for his soul.